You already feel it, that quiet frustration when you watch some guy walk into a room, not the loudest one, not the best looking one, and everyone just shifts toward him. You've told yourself it's luck, genetics, money, something you don't have. It's not. What you're watching is a man who stopped performing and started being. And the gap between those two things is the entire reason some men feel magnetic at 45, while others feel invisible at 25. Here's the uncomfortable part. Most of what you've been taught about becoming that guy is either wrong or it's a shortcut that collapses the second real pressure shows up. So, what actually separates the men people gravitate toward from the men people politely tolerate? Stay with me. This one's gonna sting a little before it helps. If you're watching this, I'm guessing you're not a teenager chasing a personality online told you to fake. You're a grown man, or you're trying to become one faster, and you're tired of advice that sounds like a sales pitch. You want to understand why certain men command a room without saying much, and you want the real mechanics, not a slogan. I'm not going to insult you with hustle culture one-liners. You already know just be confident is useless advice. Confidence isn't a switch you flip. It's a byproduct of specific internal work most men never actually do because it's slower and less flattering than pretending. Here's my promise to you. By the end of this video, you'll understand 7 distinct traits, grounded in real psychology, not folklore, that separate men who age into genuine presence from men who just age. These aren't pickup lines or manipulation tricks. If a tactic requires the other person not to notice what you're doing, it's not a trait, it's a trick, and tricks expire. What I'm giving you today doesn't expire because it's not about controlling how anyone perceives you, it's about who you actually become. 2 things I want to plant in your mind right now because we'll come back to them. First, there's a psychological concept called self-concept clarity. How clearly you know who you are, independent of outside validation, and it predicts long-term respect and attraction far better than looks, money, or charisma tricks. I'll show you exactly how to build it. Second, there's a specific moment, usually right after a rejection, a breakup, or public failure, where most men either regress into neediness or forge the exact traits we're about to cover. I'll show you which fork in that road actually works and why the no contact, detach completely advice you've heard is only half the story. None of this is about becoming cold, distant, or performing indifference. Emotionally unavailable men aren't attractive, they're just unavailable. What we're talking about today is emotional maturity, the capacity to feel things fully without being controlled by them. That's a different skill entirely, and almost nobody teaches it clearly. So let's get into it, because the first thing most men believe about older, respected men is completely backwards. Here's what most guys assume. Older men who command respect got there through experience alone, time in the game, more reps, more relationships, more money. Eventually, it just clicks. That's not what the research on personal development and relationship psychology actually shows. Time doesn't build presence. Processed experience does. There's a massive difference between a man who's lived 45 years and a man who's actually metabolized 45 years, meaning he's extracted the lessons instead of just accumulating scar tissue and calling it wisdom. You've met both versions. The 50-year-old who's still bitter about a divorce from a decade ago, still making the same relationship mistakes, still performing the same defensiveness, versus the 50-year-old who's unbothered, direct, and doesn't need anyone's approval to feel solid in a room. Same amount of time, wildly different outcomes. So what's the actual mechanism? Psychologists call it post-traumatic growth. The idea that difficulty, when processed rather than avoided, doesn't just heal you back to baseline, it can push you past it. Not the difficulty itself, the processing. Most men skip that step entirely. They get hurt, they get guarded, and they mistake the guarding for growth. Let me give you a real scenario because this is where it gets personal. Picture a man in his late 30s, goes through a brutal breakup. For the first few months, he does the things everyone tells him to do. No contact, hits the gym, gets busy. On the surface, it looks like growth. but underneath, he's still running the same internal script. I need to become impressive enough that this never happens to me again. That's not healing, that's armor. And armor is heavy. Everyone around him can feel the weight of it, even if they can't name it. Now picture a different man, same breakup. He does the same external things, but somewhere in there, he actually sits with the discomfort instead of outrunning it. He asks himself uncomfortable questions. What did I actually need in that relationship that I wasn't getting? What did I avoid confronting because it was easier not to? He doesn't emerge over it in some fake, aggressively fine way. He emerges clearer. And clarity, not toughness, is what people actually feel drawn to. That's the whole secret hiding in plain sight. It was never about becoming unbothered. It was about becoming undivided, a man whose inside matches his outside, with nothing performative propping it up. There's a concept in psychology called cognitive dissonance, the discomfort you feel when your actions don't match your self-image. Men who chase attraction tactics without doing the internal work live in constant dissonance. They're saying confident things while feeling hollow underneath. And people register that mismatch even when they can't consciously explain why something feels off about a guy. Compare that to a man operating from what psychologists call an internal locus of control, the belief that his stability comes from his own standards and choices, not from what other people think of him or whether the last relationship worked out. That belief isn't arrogance. It's the opposite of the defensiveness we usually mistake for confidence. So here's the truth most men never hear. You don't become magnetic by managing how you're perceived. You become magnetic by closing the gap between who you actually are and who you're pretending to be. Every ounce of energy spent performing is energy not spent building. And people, everyone, not just romantic partners, can feel which one they're standing in front of. That's the shift. Now let's talk about how you actually build it. This is the part where I stop describing the problem and start giving you something to actually use. 7 traits, real mechanism behind each one, and the mistake that quietly wrecks it if you're not careful. 1. Emotional regulation, not suppression. The action. When something upsets you, name it internally before you react to it. I'm feeling embarrassed right now instead of snapping or going silent. The mechanism? Regulated men create psychological safety around them. People, friends, partners, coworkers, relax in the presence of someone whose mood isn't a live wire. That safety reads as strength because it is. The mistake, confusing regulation with suppression. Stuffing anger down isn't maturity, it's a delayed explosion. Real regulation means you feel it fully, then choose your response. Suppression just postpones the bill. 2. A standard, not a rule book. The action, decide in advance what behavior you will and won't accept from yourself and from others, and hold that line quietly without announcing it. The mechanism. This builds what's called self-concept clarity, the trait I mentioned earlier. You stop needing external validation to know who you are because you've already defined it. People trust men who are legible, who behave consistently whether or not anyone's watching. The mistake? Turning your standards into ultimatums or lectures. The second, you're narrating your boundaries out loud as a performance. You've turned self-respect into a manipulation tactic, and people can smell that instantly. 3. Curiosity over certainty. The action, in conversation, ask real questions and actually listen to the answers, instead of waiting for your turn to talk. The mechanism. Certainty is exhausting to be around. Curiosity signals security. Only a man who isn't threatened by not having every answer can stay genuinely curious about someone else's perspective. The mistake, performing curiosity as a technique, the fake active listening, that's really just a strategy to seem interested. People register perform curiosity almost immediately. It has to be real. 4. Financial and practical competence. The action, build actual capability, manage your money, handle your responsibilities, know how to solve real problems without falling apart. The mechanism, this isn't about wealth, it's about reliability. Competence signals that a man can be depended on under pressure, which matters far more long-term than charm ever will. The mistake, substituting the appearance of success, status symbols, flexing, for the substance of it. Appearance is a rental. Competence is ownership. 5. Comfort with silence. The action, practice not filling every pause. In conversation, in conflict, in uncertainty, let space exist without rushing to resolve it. The mechanism, neediness is loud. It fills silence with reassurance-seeking, over-explaining, or anxious energy. A man who can sit in silence without needing to control it signals, without saying a word, that his sense of self doesn't depend on the next reaction he gets. The mistake, using silence as a weapon, the cold, punishing kind of quiet meant to make someone chase you. That's not comfort with silence. That's manipulation wearing silence as a costume, and it corrodes trust fast. 6. Owning your mistakes without collapsing. The action, when you're wrong, say so directly. No excessive apologizing, no excuses, no self-flagellation. Just, that was on me. Here's what I'll do differently. The mechanism. This demonstrates something rare, a stable identity that doesn't shatter under criticism. You can be wrong without becoming worthless. That stability is deeply reassuring to everyone around you. The mistake? Over-apologizing until it becomes about soothing your own guilt rather than actually repairing anything. That flips the dynamic. Suddenly the other person is managing your emotions instead of the reverse. 7. A life that doesn't depend on anyone's approval. The action. Build genuine interests, friendships, and purpose that exist independent of any relationship. Not as a strategy, as an actual life. The mechanism. This is the trait that makes everything else sustainable. A man whose sense of meaning isn't outsourced to how one person feels about him is simply less fragile, and fragility is what erodes respect over time, no matter how good the other 6 traits look on the surface. The mistake, faking independence, the classic I don't need anyone posture that's really just fear of intimacy wearing a confident mask. Real independence isn't the absence of connection. It's connection without desperation. Notice something about all 7 of these. Not one of them is about anyone else. Not one is a tactic aimed outward. Every single one is an internal shift that happens to produce external respect as a side effect, not the goal. That's the part almost nobody tells you. I know what's actually happening in your head right now because I've been there. It's 1 a.m. or 3 a.m. and you're replaying a version of yourself that didn't handle something well. Maybe it's a breakup. Maybe it's watching someone else get treated the way you wish you'd been treated. Maybe it's just the slow, grinding frustration of feeling like you're doing the work and nothing's changing yet. I want to say something directly to that feeling because it deserves a real answer, not a slogan. None of the 7 traits I just gave you install overnight. Emotional regulation isn't a switch. It's a rep you do badly, then slightly less badly for months. Self-concept clarity doesn't arrive in a single realization. It's built the way calluses form through repeated contact with discomfort you didn't avoid. If you're 3 weeks into trying to embody any of this and you don't feel transformed yet, that's not failure. That's exactly on schedule. Here's the reframe I want you to actually hold on to. The impatience you're feeling isn't a sign something's wrong with your progress. It's the last layer of the old pattern. The part of you that still believes worth has to be proven quickly or it doesn't count. That belief is the very thing this whole process is dismantling. So when you feel that itch to rush, to perform, to prove it faster, notice it, don't obey it. Silence, stillness, the slow, unglamorous work of becoming someone steady, none of that is weakness. It only feels like weakness because we've been trained by everything loud and instant around us to associate visibility with value. But the men who actually hold a room, who actually get remembered, aren't the ones who move the fastest. They're the ones who became someone worth being around and had the patience to let that happen on its own timeline. You are not behind. You are not too old, too late, or too far gone to build this. Every single trait we talked about today is available to you starting today, not after some imaginary point where you've arrived. The man in his 50s who has this and the man in his 20s who's just starting, the only real difference between them is repetitions, not some genetic head start you missed out on. So here's what I actually want you to do with the next week. Pick one, just one of the 7 traits, not all of them. 1. Practice it badly on purpose until it stops being a performance and starts being how you actually operate. That's the whole game, not perfection, repetition. And when the doubt creeps back in, because it will, remember this. The version of you that people are drawn to isn't some future finished, upgraded model waiting at the end of a transformation montage. He's built in the boring, repeated choices you make when nobody's watching and nothing's being proven to anyone. That's not a consolation prize. That's the actual mechanism. And now you know it. If this gave you something real to work with, don't just scroll past it, hit subscribe, because I'm building out the rest of this series specifically for men who are done chasing tactics and ready to actually build something that lasts. And I want to hear from you directly. Which of the 7 traits do you think you're weakest in right now? Put it in the comments, not to perform vulnerability, just to name it. Naming it is step 1. I'll see you in the next one.